Hi, Helen.
Hi.
I'm very excited that you're here, and I am really looking forward hearing all the stories that you you would like to share with us. But before that, let's just start with a little introduction about you and when you started in property management and what's your current role and so on.
Okay, so I am Helen Roberts. I am the Director of Client Services for Fexco Property Services. The current role means that I am responsible for business development across all of the brands that sit within Fexco Property Services. So my role is predominantly new business, new clients, new business strategies, but also the kind of softer element of property management, and I have a huge focus on placemaking and community engagement, and lately biodiversity net gain, which of course is turning estate management onto its side. I started in property management, yikes, 25 years ago. I don't look that old, obviously. But yeah, I came from student housing, and I started my career, I would say, in Mainstay as an area manager. So I went straight in as an area manager, and worked in Mainstay for about 9 or 10 years, and then came to open a regional office for Remus Management, which is now a subsidiary of Fexco Property Services. And I started the Welsh office for them on my own. Built the Welsh office over about 7 or 8 years. Built it to a reasonable pipeline of about 12,000 units and 7 members of staff, and then kind of broke into business development. I think in the same way that other people do, had a kind of timeline on property management. And, when you've done it for 15 years, as it was, I kind of got to a stage where I thought, if I answer another parking complaint or a bin query, or I'm going to go do lally tap.
Yeah,
So I started to lose my passion for the
yeah.
day-to-day property management. And then I think as soon as you lose your passion, you lose your edge. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to move into business development. And now I run all of the brands that sit within FPS, and have a team underneath me that do all of the hard work.
And how close you still work with property managers?
Yeah,
Is
I
that
mean, I tend to work more with the senior team that then gets fed down, but will speak to property managers regularly, more on a training perspective, when I'm doing handover training or biodiversity net gain training, estates. So I still very much keep my eye on the ball in terms of what's going on, but I don't work daily in the operations.
I understand. And so I'll take you back then. When you were a property manager, what kind of blocks did you manage back then when you were a property
So
manager?
when I first started, I actually managed at that point the largest leasehold development in Europe, which was a development in Cardiff of about 1,000 apartments. And as I say, it was the largest leasehold development at that time. I mean, many, many moons ago now. And so that was, my largest scheme. And then I had everything from 9 blocks to up to, like I say, 1,000 blocks, listed buildings, high rise. Although I'm not even sure we knew they were called high rise in those days. They were just big blocks of
Big
apartments.
blocks. Yeah.
Yeah, big blocks,
Yeah.
and everything in between, predominantly RMCs, with a couple of freehold portfolios in between. But you name it, I've probably managed it.
Yeah. I can imagine that. And what was your day? How would you describe your day? Because I can only imagine that it was very much different from what it is now.
Yeah, do you know what I think the difference is? A property manager in those days was your A to Z of everything. So I feel like you spent all of your time firefighting whatever was of that moment. And of course, there's still an element to that for property managers, but these days, and particularly when you work for a large company such as ours, you have specific departments that take on specific roles and responsibilities. So the property manager can organize themselves effectively and rely on other people for other things. Whereas back in those days, you were just like a rabbit in headlights, just, you know, dealing with the person that shouted the loudest, or the emergency was that was on the table of that day. And if I'm honest, I'm not sure we were as professional or educated as the property managers of today. I mean, I see some of the younger, more recently qualified property managers that are coming through the ranks now, and they're a hell of a lot better than I ever was. Because I think that I always tended to deal with every situation as I saw that it should be dealt with. And I wish that I would have been more focused on the lease, the Landlord and Tenant Act, the RICS Service Charge Code of Practice. I think I was, particularly when you're young and you have that imposter syndrome, and I always felt that I was doing a very professional job. But should I have been in that job? Did I deserve to be in that job? And I feel like I just spent my whole time just running around trying frantically to solve everybody's problems. And now I realize that actually, as a property manager, your job isn't to just solve everybody's problems. It's to tell people, well, this is what the lease says, or this is what the regulation says. This is what I can do within the confines of my agreement. And maybe if I'd have had that mindset 20 years ago, my job would have been a little bit easier. Particularly when you're dealing with what we would term previously managed developments, and you're speaking to an RMC or an RTM company, and they're sounding you out, you know, how you do things. One of the questions they always ask you is, well, how do you deal with lease breaches and neighbourly disputes and stuff like that? And of course, the action is, it's not our job to deal with neighbourly disputes or antisocial behaviour. And unfortunately, when you give them that answer, that I'm not a local authority, I'm not a policeman, I'm not, you know, the environmental agency or whatnot, they feel that you're doing a lesser job than you should, because there's this general misunderstanding of what a property manager or a managing agent should be supplying to the leasehold industry.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is the case, and there is a lot that is happening behind the curtains that is not seen, and it's not valued from lease, isn't it? If I go back when I started in property management, I think very much of what you described, understanding was exactly that you just run around and try and resolve everything, and that's why I was, you know, it's common sense when it's a job, but it still wasn't, right?
Well, this is it. I mean, yes, you always have to apply common sense. Of course you do. But actually, common sense is a teeny tiny part of what we do, because there is always an answer for something. And common sense in terms of how you deal with it, or how you manage the situation, may be appropriate. But that's not the answer. Use common sense is actually probably the worst advice they could have given you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I struggled for 3 years, but I got
yes. Well done, lasting 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a different story. I've never been in front of the computer so much as I am nowadays as a property manager. I used to go to sites on a regular basis, and that is not really possible much, because emails are just flooding my inbox.
But I think, you know, actually, if I look back at my early days as well, on the plus side of how things have changed, I mean, God, we used to do our site inspections on paper.
Yes,
and I would print off about 100 pages of papers on a complex site, and you'd be walking around ticking and writing, and if it rained, the paper would get wet, and you'd have a shared camera in the office that, you know, you wouldn't be able to take out if somebody else had it, and you had to change the
Yeah.
batteries and then come back and take the SD card out and download it. And so on the flip side of it, I look back and I think, how did we manage to do a decent enough job?
Tell me one of those projects that you remember so well.
And this probably actually goes against what I said earlier, but a multiple block, and it was time to do carpet replacement. And, you know, I just started my, what was TPI before? IRPM. So I just started, you know, going through my IRPM and stuff, and I nailed section 20 and consultation, and it was in my mind that, you know, if it was over that £250, consultation.
Yeah.
And I was desperately trying to be this professional and, you know, do everything by the book, and because ILPM were telling me to do it by the book. And so I did carpet replacement on a 10 block development, followed section 20, as I should have, but employed external, it can't have been a surveyor, whoever it was, you know, a consultant or whatnot, to follow the procedure, which of course added X amount of cost to the overall project. I'm chuffed as beans with myself. You know, I've nailed this. I've, you know, ticked all the boxes. Brilliant. The carpet is down. Everybody's going to love me. And actually, what happened was they went, well, why the heck couldn't you do that yourself? All you needed to do was send a couple of letters out and blah, 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 blah. And I think that was my first learning, that you have to get the balance between following the rules, being the professional, but also going, is this something that I could do myself, or is it going to come back to bite me on the arse at another time? And what's one rule for one doesn't work for the other. So you might get an RMC in block A that if I'd have done it myself, that would have been a problem, because they wouldn't have respected that I had the qualifications or the nous to run that project myself. But block B wouldn't want that external party. So I think, I guess you learned from it to communicate. But also, I think my overall learning, which still stands to this day, is you make a decision, you stand by a decision, and you stand by it, and you stand by it, and you stand by it. Sometimes even if you're wrong, you know, you've got to stand by the choices that you made. And in that time, if you believe that that was the right decision and you paid your own due diligence to the situation, sometimes you don't get everything right. But I think I just learned that what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And you've got to find your own way of dealing with it and knowing your own capabilities and limitations.
Absolutely. And I just remembered as well, section 20 was one of my favorite tasks when I started, because it was so clear, this is the process, and then you can't get it wrong.
This is it, you know, and you feel like, you know, I remember being young and studying for this professional qualification, and up until I kind of started my career, in air quotes, yeah, I'd had about 1,000 jobs. I think I'd been sacked from most of them. I had no direction. And all of a sudden this was kind of me playing in the big world, you know, and it was about me really at that. Had I been to university by then? Yes, I'd been to university as a mature student, and but I got a degree in tourism management. So this was kind of my first time that, yeah, I was feeling like a professional, and by following section 20 and thinking, you know, you were doing it properly, I just felt like, oh, I'm there. And, you know, apparently people didn't appreciate the fact that I had followed those processes.
All these years, we are still on £250 per flat.
I mean, what does that get you these days? Geez.
I remember back in the days, my director, David, will say, because we were managing smaller blocks at that time as well, and he will say, just send them consent form, just send them consent form. but I loved the Section 20 process. So, there was
Yeah.
the constant.
But I think, now actually, as an in-house model, we have certain rules about what Section 20s the property managers do themselves. We do a lot of it within the property management team, and then kind of only go to your surveyors and outside consultants when they're complex or engineering or whatever. But I think in those days, your go-to was to just go to other people to do that professional side of it, and I never really had the confidence in myself that I would have been able to get a notice of intention right, or and I look back now and I think, God, I wish I'd have just backed myself a little bit more, because hey, they're not that difficult.
No, they're not. They're not, Helen. But talk to me, you just mentioned something, because it is something that also sometimes leaseholders do not understand, why we're reaching out to surveyors to project manage a job. So you have an experience in this topic. Can you please tell me a little bit more of like why, and maybe share a situation or a project you work with?
I think it's just important again to know your limitations, and you can have rules about what you do and what you don't do, and what's in your management fee and what's not in your management fee. But I think it's about recognizing, am I comfortable with this? Do I know enough about the subject matter? Okay, in hindsight, carpet's carpet. I probably could have done that myself. But if I'm looking at lift replacement, no, I don't know that. Roof replacement, all of these, it's just about identifying, am I going to be able to hold my own in a conversation about this? And if the answer is no, then you go to somebody that is better equipped to deal with it than you are. I pretty much always reach out to a specialist where I need to. I learned over the years to, do your foyer replacements and stuff, your redex to a certain level yourself. But again, it depends on the complexity and the size of the building and stuff. So, I think rather than a particular project, it's more about, for instance, we had a large grade 2 listed building when I was a regional manager that had a structure failure in the middle of the night, and it had a supporting pillar going through the 5 floors of the apartments, and in the middle of the night the shoes of the pillar dropped and all apartments essentially went at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the first thing I knew about it was when somebody phoned me at 3 o'clock and said, turn BBC News on. And I turned BBC News on and there was my building. And I thought,
wow.
Oh. Yeah. So, you jump in the car and you go. So there was a huge LABC claim, obviously. Everybody got evacuated and rehomed. And actually the project to get people back in and rebuild that building was about 28 months in total.
Wow.
There is no way in hell that I'm going to manage that project myself.
No.
Did I take on a lot of the softer elements of it? Absolutely. But I'm not a surveyor. I don't work in construction. I'm not expected to know the ins and outs of the physicalities of a building and how structures work. So, in situations like that, of course, you're going to go out to a professional. But, I think we now have a lot more contacts in the business as well, that you are able to reach out to people for advice a lot more than you used to. We're one huge family in the leasehold industry. I've never known an industry like it. So you do have that network that you can rely on a little bit more than you used to be able to assist you in the smaller projects.
That is a huge project that you have.
It was my worst nightmare but also probably my biggest achievement, to be honest with you. And we were able to take huge learnings from it as a company. You know, it was before Fexco Property Services, and we were a smaller company and maybe didn't have the business continuity plans that we've got in place now. But it almost took something like that to sit back afterwards and go, what went wrong with that? What can we learn by it? What would we do differently next time? And actually, it ties into the whole following the rules, and because the insurance policy, the block insurance policy,
Top.
very quickly said, we're backing away from this. It's clearly an LABC issue. The property was maybe 2 years old. Your block policy is not coming into play. It's LABC. So I've got people out in the street, and I mean in their pajamas, babies, the whole 9 yards. The Red Cross has set up a, like an emergency van.
Yeah.
I've got it was like a Hollywood movie, honestly. And then when the fire brigade had ensured that everybody had been evacuated, they then gave me a high vis vest and said, you're now in control of this situation. And so I'm in, red stilettos, little dress, high vis, and now I'm in control of this situation. And I've got these insurance parties arguing, and nobody would take control of how this situation was going to be managed in terms of where these people were going to go. Because the block insurance, even if they would have taken it on immediately, didn't have the cover in it for alternative accommodation. Which I know is a hot topic at the moment with lots of changes. And the LABC were kind of still bumping their gums as to whether they would take it on. And I think that's where the human aspect of a property manager comes in. And I was stood there and I thought, do you know what? I don't give a shit what any of you are saying. I'm going to take it upon myself to put that woman that's holding a baby in her pajamas in a hotel. I'm going to deal with this the way that I think it should be dealt with, and then we'll work it all out afterwards.
Yeah.
Should I have done that? Probably not, to be honest with you. But you can't. Again, it goes back to my earlier narrative of you've got to get that fine blend between doing it by the book and using your own head and kind of finding the way in between.
Well, that's empathy, isn't it? Just also.
It's like, I'm a human. I'm not, I'm not gonna. And also, I'm not telling that woman to her face.
Wow. 28 months to rebuild that building.
Yeah, I mean, it was grade 2 listed, which didn't help. And yeah, we had all sorts of peculiarities that came out of it.
Imagine. Great learning, though, right?
Amazing,
What an experience.
absolutely amazing. I mean, this is probably, I don't know, 12 years ago. I still use it as an example in training modules to property managers today, because unfortunately you've got to go through your emergencies to learn from them. Because as much as you can sit property managers down with a piece of paper or a PowerPoint or get them to sit an exam, like you said at the beginning, it's that on the ground experience that makes you a good property manager. You can sit all the exams you want and attend all the seminars, and
Yeah.
for me, it's your on the ground experience.
Yeah, that experience is priceless. You just
Sure.
there is no book to read, and obviously with all these situations, this comes to disputes and people unhappy and trying to, everyone is pulling you, right? I'm demanding something from you, and you just sit and you're like, you don't know which part to take.
Yeah.
How did you handle disputes back in the days with these?
I think it's important to not be anybody's friend, as harsh as that sounds. You know, you can't be favourable to one person over the other. You have to know and be confident in what your job is and what the confines of your role are. And you present as it should be, And as long as you do it well and you communicate well and you're polite and you're respectful, how people take that is how people take that. You know, as long as I can go to bed at night knowing that I have done the best job possible and that I did it to the best of my ability and I did it with a smile on my face, it's kind of their problem.
Yeah, no, it's still there, isn't it? And
Sure.
this is something that we're trying to mend as a relationship between leaseholders and property management.
I
But
remember very, very early on in my career, a group of leaseholders weren't happy with me, the company, the block, you know, a myriad of things.
mm,
And I was at a residents meeting at a venue, and I had a very young assistant with me, even though I was probably only, what am I, 44 now? I was in my 20s, late 20s. And I had a kind of 18-year-old assistant property manager with me. And we went to this residents meeting, and it was horrific. You know what they're like. And, you know, sometimes when they get to be almost like mob mentality.
yeah,
And whatever issue we were talking about, even though it was 8 o'clock at night in the winter and it was dark, I said, look, I'll follow you back to the building, and I'll come and have a look at it for you. By the time I got to the building, I've come up in the lift doors open, and I go out into the corridor, and they're lined up in the corridor.
waiting
And
for you.
I got out of the lift, have never been more intimidated in my whole entire life, but go into protection mode over the younger member of staff that's with me. You know, boobs and teeth, come on, let's do this. And shit myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. Anyway, dealt with it. And then within 24 hours, a Facebook group had been set up um,
Against you.
against me,
Wow.
calling me an oxygen thief, and
Wow.
making references to the mother who born, who, you know, who gave birth to me,
Wow.
and what value does this woman bring to the earth, and blah 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 blah. I mean, luckily they spelt my name wrong, because even though I'm a Roberts now, I was Salzburg, which was slightly harder to spell. So
Yeah.
luckily they spelt it wrong. So if anyone was googling me, it wouldn't have come up. But I'm quite fiery. You know, I've got something about me. If I'd have been a different person, I can't imagine what that would have done to me. You know, to see these
Broke
posts,
you.
it would have broke me. And genuinely, all I was doing was my job. You know, I can't even tell you with sincerity whether I was doing a good job or not. I don't know. It's a moot point. But to be physically intimidated as I'm kind of walking down that corridor, and then to have this, you know, internet trolling, and this before internet trolling was a thing, it was truly frightening. And actually, I see it now more than I ever did before in terms of you know, comments on individuals and on Trustpilot and on Google, and it's a real and present thing that we have to face and we have to protect our property managers from.
Absolutely. And in that situation, there is not much you can do, because if you respond, it will probably be worse, isn't it?
Yeah,
Than not saying.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, isn't it? Because again, do you toe the party line, and or how do you deal with it? What's the right way? I don't know the answer to that. I think, unfortunately, if you're the type of person that is disrespectful enough to think that that behavior is acceptable, however you react to it, it's not going to make any difference at all.
No, and this is the problem with a lot of people who act in this way, which is
Yeah.
kind of sad, and it hurts us because you've done so much, and only you know how much you've done for the property, and you've gone above and beyond, and it's just not valued and understood. And yeah, sometimes it's just best to. I've learned over the years that sometimes it's best to be quiet than to say anything. Because if that is their
Good at
way,
being quiet. I'm not that's not my strength.
yeah.
You're a lot calmer than I am. I'm yeah, it's not one of my strengths, unfortunately. It's like poking a bear.
Yeah, I'm like that in recent years, and just because I'm realizing that I want to save my energy for better causes, let's say.
Yeah.
So
Good point. I'll actually take that one on board myself.
with time, we learn what is important and the priorities. It's kind of like learning in the job and looking at these emails and assessing what is important, what is urgent, what is to leave for the next 5 days to reply, and so on. So
We change as we get older as well, right? You know, I say to property managers all the time, we're not brain surgeons. Nobody is at risk of life and death if you don't answer that email now. You know, like take a breath, don't let it consume you. Have you done your best? Yes, then breathe, you know.
yeah,
But no other job, if you have a portfolio of 1,000 units, which let's be honest, every property manager would love that smaller portfolio. But if you've got that property, you've got the 2 leaseholders per property, you've got the local authorities, the RMCs, the house builders. These days, the MPs are getting involved in complaints. So you've literally got you know, all of these people coming at you and all wanting a piece of your time. And I think only age and experience allows you to be able to navigate your way through that.
I started implementing a way of taking over a new building. It's very important to assess and to make an action plan for the next 1 to 12 months and send that to everyone so they can stay away,
Manage their expectations.
and yeah, manage their expectations, exactly, but also make a plan for you and not just jump from place. Because you know what it's like, taking over a new building, you are expected to resolve all the issues within a very short space of time, which is
And also bear in mind that you are very much reliant on the old agent giving you the information and the finances. So you could be good to go. But unless you've got that communication or the goodwill from the old agent, your hands are tied as well. So,
yeah.
you know, it's not your own success that you have to rely on, it's other people as well in that journey.
Absolutely. And information lacks still, these days it's still difficult sometimes. Self-managed buildings, a lot we have taken in the past few years, and then it just stuck from zero. There is nothing.
Sure.
The self-managed actually are way more work than anything else because they're not compliant. There is thousands of issues that you need to resolve, and setting up expectations, reasonable expectations, is very important. So, and then obviously, as you said earlier, we're also mediators, neighbor matters and all that, which it is something that we touch base on: communication, disputes, and these conversations is something that I really struggle with, because you're trying to explain as a property manager, that's not my job, basically, in short terms. And you're trying to also be patient and to listen to someone who called, but how long this can go for, until you basically say, well, I had enough, this will continue this way. So it is something that I struggled for a very long time. And this is maybe where my patience grew more, and I was like, take a deep breath and don't answer to this email now just because you came in and you're like, I have thousands of words to say, and just leave it for tomorrow. Like you said, it's not it's not the end of the day, and you can reply tomorrow, even in 2 days.
Yeah.
But we as women in property management, we are very emotional as well, and are going through, the stage of.
Yeah, I think that also makes us good at what we do, not to be pro-female and, all feminist about it. But I do think in general, women can use their emotions to help them empathize with the situation and, look at it in a slightly different way.
Absolutely. What common mistakes do you see in property managers, or have seen in property managers in the past few years?
I think property managers who, again, don't realize their own limitations, and maybe try to deal with things that they shouldn't deal with. But our biggest mistake across the board is not communicating. And I mean communicating when you've got nothing to communicate about, and the whole, just to let you know, I haven't got an update for you. Just to let you know, I haven't heard back from that contractor. Just to let you know, I've chased this. Before it gets to the stage where people are saying to you, what is going on with this? And I think if property managers, is it workload? Questionable. But I feel that the old school way of communication is being lost, and more and more month on month. And as we do become more focused on our computers and our admin and stuff like that, I think that good old fashioned face-to-face phone calls, open surgeries, getting a shitty email in, but just picking up the phone to that person and say, oh my God, I'm gutted that I've received this email.
Yeah.
Let's have a chat about it, and I think that's across the board, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think we are forgetting to pick up the phone and call someone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's not, obviously, it's because we're buried in our emails. I think that's the reason there.
Sure.
And what do you think the next generation property managers need to, in order to succeed in this industry, ever changing and ever learning industry?
I think we're starting to make changes. And of course, we're looking to be heavily legislated and for our property managers to all be professionally qualified. But in the same way as solicitors, surveyors, I want to see us being recognised as professionals in our field and seeing people study to do what we do. And I don't mean doing the TPI while they're doing the job. I mean going to university to learn how we do our job. And really this being seen, because it's a great job. It is a great career. And your options are limitless within this industry. But we are so far away from being recognised. Everything that we do within our management fee, how much do you do that you should be billing for, could be billing for, and you don't? Because people don't recognise us as professionals. I've worked my socks off over the years to kind of get where I am. And I'm not sure that our clients, be they customers or house builders, really appreciate the levels of our expertise sometimes.
Yeah. Well, obviously, you've kept your passion all these years.
Yeah, I don't know how.
You're still in. Well, I think as mentioned earlier, we go through stages, and you just kind of feel it when it's time to move. And whether you ask for the promotion or it is, or you're recognized and given. And I think everyone who works in the industry, within any organization, is given that opportunity. So it's definitely it's worth staying. It's worth staying in the industry. It's very rewarding, isn't it? If you had if you had a magic wand, one thing that you would have fixed in about the industry.
About this one, what would I fix about the industry? I think it probably wouldn't be about the industry. It would be more about how I view the industry. And as a female in the industry,
Mm.
I always, even now, as you know, a senior person within the industry, I always have this fallback that other people know more about what they're talking about more than me. And particularly when you're talking technical issues and stuff like that, like if there's a man in the room, I'll automatically think that they know more about the subject matter than I do. And I'm not sure that's an industry thing. It's more a me thing. I guess for the industry, what I would just like to see is this legislation to be moved forward and to be moved forward quickly. And because I do a huge amount on estate management and with biodiversity and that game changing the model of estate management, I would like to see houses and estates form the same legal framework that apartments do.
Mhm.
Because at the moment, the CMA Market Authority last year didn't cover a lot of the things that I would have liked to have seen in there, to be honest with you. And since then, it's kind of fallen off a cliff and nobody has spoken about it. But I would like to see more structure within estates. And if I could wave a magic wand over the world, I would just like people to understand what they're buying.
Yeah.
I mean, if we could just start there with people understanding what they're buying
Yeah.
and what we do and how we do it and what our responsibilities are, I think our job will be a lot easier.
Many times I've received calls from from a new leaseholder that just entered and it's first time buyer. They just moved to one of our blocks, and I'm basically giving them an overview of what they bought and what property management is, and so on. So it's amazing how a lot of people have no idea. Which led me to the question of how do you see block management heading for the next few years? There's so many changes happening, and
I think our biggest problem is bringing new people into the industry. The amount of people that are leaving the industry because of all the changes and the complexities and the premise of the job changing in terms of, like you say, the Building Safety Act and the knowledge basis and stuff. I think that we're going to have further levers to the industry, which is going to affect us greatly because, you'll know yourself with staff changes, the effect that has on a portfolio and retention for clients is really difficult. So I think we've got to suffer the mass exodus from the industry and really work on bringing people into the industry and it becoming a more attractive model for them to come to work with us.
yes, and I hope that this podcast will help people.
I hope so too.
And will give them that excitement, because
Exactly.
it's also exciting. And what message would you like to share for those just starting in block management?
I just think I'd like to share that you can be whoever you want to be. I mean, I didn't finish school. I don't have a GCSE to my name. I left school at 15. Hard work, grit, determination. You can make this industry whatever you want it to be. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a property manager per se. There are other roles within the property management industry that can be done it. So, you can have skill sets, but don't quite sit into the property manager role because of, whatever reason, but there's a place for you in this industry. And I would say that the other elements of the job, so this family feel that we have as an industry is incredible. It is absolutely incredible.
It's bigger than ever, and I think it will continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely, because we need to rely on each other more because of the complexities of the industry. So, you know, I'm biased, but I would champion anybody coming into our industry because, you know, I think it's great.
Yeah, and we will support everyone throughout, right?
Exactly.
That's why we're here to share our stories and to learn from each other as well, because no matter how long we've been in the industry, there is always something to learn.
Yeah, and hey, you know, if there's anybody that wants to join the industry that has any reservations or queries, I'm sure they could pick up the phone to either one of us, and both of us would be happy to, you know, help them out.
Absolutely. Helen, it's been absolutely pleasure to
Thank you very, very much.
you and great insights, and I'm sure that someone will listen and
Go on then, you can say hello. Say hello, you two.
hello. Amazing.
I knew
Thank
they'd
you
make
so
it onto the podcast at some point. Say hi. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do it now. Thanks, Brilliant.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
A pleasure, absolute pleasure.